Hello everybody. In this video we will be talking about coordinate geometry. The word geometry is coined from a Greek word. Geo means earth and metry simply means measurement. So I can say the measurement of the earth is simply geometry. Coordinate, on the other hand, is simply a precise location in space which can be gotten using two values, a value from the x and a value from the y. It is always written in the form x, y. So, coordinate geometry, you are trying to measure the earth or get a precise location using a coordinate. So, if you have your y-axis, which is vertical, connecting it with your x-axis, horizontal, the line is what shows the connection between the x-axis and the y-axis. For you to get a point along this line, you must use a coordinate, meaning one value from the x and another value from the y. So this will be written as x, y. So this point can be called A. You get another point. This can be written as x2, y2. This is just to differentiate. I can call this point B. This as x2 to differentiate it from the first one. So this is y, and I call this y2 to also differentiate it from the first. So I can call this x1 or y1. So we'll be looking at three major calculations. The first calculation is called the distance between two points. The second is midpoint of a line. And lastly, in this video, we'll be looking at the gradient of a line. In the next video, we'll look at the rest calculations, which are quite simple as well. So let's look at the first one, which is called distance between 2 points. Distance between 2 points is self-explanatory, meaning you have a coordinate I call A, you have another coordinate I called B. I'm trying to locate the distance between point A and point B, then I simply term it as distance between 2 points. So I can call this point A and I can call this point B. Point A must have a value xy. Point B must also have a value x2, y2. I can decide to call this 1, x1, y1 to just make it a little bit clearer. So this is called point A and point B. So the distance between A and B, point A can be pointing at a location. Let's assume this is USA, and point B is pointing at another location. This can be France, doesn't really matter. So you're trying to locate the distance between point A and point B. That will simply term it as distance between 2 points. Now, an equation is simply used to calculate it, which is gotten from Pythagoras' theorem. Hypotenuse square is equal to opposite square plus adjacent square. So if this is point A and down to point B, so the distance between A and B is represented as D. So I can say D square is equal to the opposite is given as the value for the x. So if this is x1, x2, this will be y1, and this will be y2, because this connects to give us a point, which is x1, y1, and this other point will be x2, y2. So the opposite in this case, I just decided to use it as x2 minus x1, which is the change in the x-axis, meaning if I should connect it this way, the change in the x-axis, which is x2 minus x1 square plus y2 minus y1 square, the square root of x2 negative x1 square plus y2 negative y1 square. Look at an example for us to simplify. Calculate the distance between 2 points A and B. So we have point A, value 4, negative 4, 3, and point B, negative 1, negative 1. These are the coordinates. So we have this for the first coordinate and this for the second coordinate. So I would simply say the distance, which is all the way from here down to this point, would be d squared should be, the first value here should be the x1, y1, x2, y2. So what is x squared minus x1, x2 minus x1 all squared, plus y2 minus y1 all squared. So this becomes, what is my x2? Negative 1, negative x1 is going to give me a negative 4 all squared, plus y2 will give me a negative 1, negative, what is y1? That is 3 all squared. This becomes negative 1 plus 4 square plus negative 4 square. So this can become 9, which is negative 1 plus 4 gives you 3. 3 square gives you 9, plus negative 4 gives you 16. This is d squared, d squared, d squared, and I'll end up with 25. So d squared is equal to 25. So d is going to become, taking the square root of both sides, it gives you 5 units. And you're done. If you move to the next, midpoint of 2 points on a straight line. You have point A as well. I can call this 1, 3, and you have point B. I can call this 5, 6. So this is one coordinate, this is another coordinate. The midpoint is simply the center of the line. And how do we derive the formula? Look at this graph to get a better understanding. If I call this y and I call this x, so I have a line connecting them when I'm connecting the both values. So let's assume I say this is the x1, which is the first value I pick, and this is now the y1, and I call this the x2, and I also call this the y2. Now you would notice if this, for instance, is 1 and this is 2, 3, and let's assume this is 5, or after 4, 5, then this should be 2, 4, 6, 8, and let's assume this is now 10. So the midpoint between y1 and y2 is simply 10 plus 2 divided by 2, which is 10 plus 2 divided by 2 would give me what? That is 12 divided by 2, which is 6. So you've gotten the first point for the y. This is also going to be 5 plus 1 divided by 2, which is 6 divided by 2. This is going to simply give me 3. So this will be 3, something 3 here. So if you connect the 6, if you connect the 3 and the 6 together, you get the midpoint between point A and point B. I hope you get the point. So the midpoint is simply the middle of the line. So this point should be in the form of also an x and a y. If I can call this a p, I can call this an m, doesn't really care. So I can simply say AP must be equal to PB for this to be termed as midpoint. So mathematically, I can say the midpoint, let's use M to represent it in this case. This would be x2 plus x1 divided by 2, y2 plus y1 divided by 2. So let's look at an example to make us understand it better. 2 points A and B, whose coordinates are 2, 3 and 4, 7 respectively. If P is the midpoint of distance AB, find the coordinate of P. I would simply say point A, point B. Point A has the coordinates 2, 3. Point B has a coordinate 4, 7. They want me to find the midpoint and they call it a what? A P. So what is going to be my X and what is going to be my Y? I would simply call this X1, Y1, X2, Y2. So simply add the X's and the Y, divide them by 2. So the midpoint, which is represented as P, would be X2 plus X1 divided by 2, Y2 plus Y1 divided by 2. And this gives me, what is my X2? 4 plus 2. Y2 is 7 plus Y1, that is 3, divided by 2. So this gives me 6 over 2 and 10 over 2. So I'll end up with what? 3, 5. So the midpoint between point A and point B, or coordinate A and coordinate B, is 3, 5. As easy as that. Lastly, if we talk about the gradient of a line, it is simply the steepness of a line. So you have something like this. I call this the y-axis and the x-axis. To get a point in this line, you need a value from the x and you need a value from the y. So this would be x, y. Also, pick another point again. This point, I need a value from the x, which I decide to call x2, and I decide to call this y2. So x2, y2. So the run, which is called the x, over the rise, x2 minus x1. The rise is simply y2 minus y1, meaning there's a rise if you look at it this way, and there's a run, the vertical and the horizontal. The slope is simply, you can call it the vertical over the horizontal, you can call it the rise over the run, you could call it a change in y over the change in x. It becomes y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is termed as the slope. So if I'm to look at an example, this would be find the gradient, or it could be called slope. This becomes my m should be a change in y over the change in x, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this becomes x1 y1 x2 y2, and it becomes, what is it, the y2 in this case is a 3 minus, which is this minus you're seeing here. What is my y1? My y1 is also a negative 1. X2 is a negative 2. And x1 is a 2. So this becomes 3 plus 1 over 4, a negative 4. This gives me 4 over negative 4. You know there's a positive sign here. It becomes positive, negative, negative. Positive divided by negative is a negative. 4 divided by 4 will give you 1. So the slope is simply negative 1. What we've looked at today is x2 minus x1 square plus y2 minus y1 square. This is the first condition. The second is the midpoint, which is x2 plus x1 all divided by 2 and y2 plus y1 all divided by 2. And lastly, the gradient, which is simply a change in y over the change in x. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if you don't understand what I've explained, you can try this using a coordinates a to f. A can have a coordinate 4, -5, and B can have a coordinate, F can have a coordinate 6, -7. Solve this and leave your answers in the comment section below. Thank you and do have a nice day.